Thank you, everybody, for being here at our SaaS Connect one-on-one. I'm Lindsay Ward. I'm Managing Director of CSA, and we're joined by Scott Pollack, who is the CEO and co-founder of Firneo. And what we're really talking about today is how to create a path to impactful partnerships. And that draws from so many different areas and so many different personality types. As you all know, as partnership leaders, we have only really had this development in business for the last 10 or so years. And so it is still something that's so incredibly new to all of us in the way that we develop it and the way that we work throughout our companies. And I'm really excited to have Scott here today to chat with us about it and to chat about how we as partnership leaders can help facilitate our own growth and continue to thrive in SaaS business.
Yeah, Lindsay, thanks for having me. Thanks for everyone who's listening in.
So we're going to dive off and kind of start the conversation. And something I think that we've all found and that we've had in common, most of us went to either post-secondary or we learned kind of on the job about partnerships, but we never had any formal training for that ever. I know myself, I didn't go to school for it. It's something that I came into in a SaaS business, and it was a department that wasn't even developed as a partnerships role or a partnerships department in and of itself. So I had to take a bit of content from here, there, and everywhere and figure out what partnerships actually meant for my SaaS company. And so, Scott, I'm kind of curious because I know you've had a lot of experience in this. Where do we even begin to learn about partnerships?
Yeah, it's the journey that you just described, I think, is extraordinarily common. The rarer one is someone who did have some sort of more formal background in this, because 99% of people in partnerships seemingly fell into the role, and we're all figuring things out as we go along. And until relatively recently, I think many of us felt like we're figuring it out by ourselves. Mm-hmm. And some may be fortunate to have a boss or a mentor who understands what they do for a living and can teach and show the ropes of partnerships. But for the most part, I think many of us have felt like we're, making mistakes as we go, and their learning curve is steep and long. And I think that's a challenge that partnerships has faced that's somewhat unique, right? When you're an accountant, when you're a lawyer, or even a marketer or a more traditional salesperson, right? People in those roles, they can go to school for those jobs. They're surrounded by peers. You have bosses and CEOs who understand the function. And there's books you can read. That's only now starting to come into focus for partnerships, and in a way that it hasn't really been there. And I think not only has that been a challenge for many, but it's an opportunity for those who've been in the trenches for a while to be sharing their knowledge, to be the teachers. And there's an opportunity, almost an obligation, if you ask me, for everyone to kind of that's been in this boat before to step up as a mentor and sharing their expertise. And it's an opportunity for everyone who is coming up in this job to recognize that, we're all kind of paving the path simultaneously together as we go. And by sharing knowledge, by being a part of the broader partnerships and ecosystem and business development community, there's opportunities to learn and to teach.
It's interesting that you say that. And that peer-led growth is very much something that I know speaks to a lot of partnership professionals, because in that way where we do have that obligation to teach each other and to share mistakes and to kind of pave the way for this to be an area that grows within SaaS and within business, to the point that there is formal education for you. You could go to university or post-secondary or what have you to learn to be a partnerships professional and have your own designation. I'm kind of curious where do we start with that? Where do we share the information? Aside from the obvious, we like to share information in CSA in our Slack channels on SaaS Connects, exactly what we're doing here, but where else do you find it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's communities like this, organizations like Firneo, and these groups are starting to form and become the place to go to connect to peers, to learn with one another, to learn from those who've come before. So obviously what we're doing at Firneo is creating that learning community for people who are in partnerships, who are the next generation of partnerships, business development, and ecosystem leaders to share knowledge amongst themselves, but to learn from those experts who've come before. And I think increasingly those those places, I guess one might call them those third places outside of work and home, these communities like CSA or like Firneo and so forth are the places where you go to find the people who understand you, and to find the people who formally or informally become the mentors that you need. And in doing so, we all can become the mentors for those who are coming up behind us. I think the opportunities for learning are increasingly becoming more formalized. I mean, that's what we're starting to do with Firneo, creating courses for, partnership leaders to become certified partnership professionals, for example, and other programs that will have to come. Those are ways to kind of formalize your education and knowledge, but a lot of it has also began with the informal sharing that is part and parcel to the role of partnerships. Many partnerships professionals that I've talked to, the thousands that I've talked to over the years, learn from fellow partners. And, you do that on the job. And if you're fortunate enough to have a role in which you are engaged in a large array of partnerships, you have an opportunity to connect those people who can teach you and you can teach. But these organizations, like we're talking about, are also the places to go to build and grow and learn together.
And I know that, we share a lot of content within the Slack channel. So if you guys aren't in the Slack channel, I definitely recommend getting in there because the content is invaluable and it questions, the same questions come up again and again and again. And kind of the core of it is, how do we actually begin to create a partnerships program in our company? Where do we start? What is the beginning point?
Yeah, I think the path to building impactful partnerships begins at home, if you will. It begins internally. I think a lot of times there's a natural draw to jumping to, I want to go build partnerships. Let me go find people who we can partner with, companies we can partner with. Let's go do deals. Let's go launch things. And it's an understandable, natural draw to jump to that. But in the way that I've seen in my career is that is jumping to the second of 3 stages of what I call the value alignment framework, right? Where, as I said a moment ago, really successful, impactful partnerships begin at home, in the company, understanding your own internal stakeholders and understanding at an organizational level, as well as at an individual level for the individual stakeholders on product or engineering or marketing or other teams that are ultimately the stakeholders that you'll rely on to actually implement successful partnerships. It's critical to start there and understand what is valuable at every level of the organization, from a company level based on the CEO's priorities to an individual level. What are the goals that the marketing leads have? What is driving their goals? What are their current priorities? And understanding at that level, what is it that motivates them at an individual and an organizational level is the starting point to saying, well, I can now identify the opportunities that will get their support and buy-in. Because without that support and buy-in, when we jump to that next phase, without having those preconditions met of like, we're working on things that they will care about, that they will be willing to support, we can go down the path of what I like to call vanity partnerships, where we're doing partnership deals that ultimately fall apart, like celebrity marriages do, right? They're flash in the pan, and they don't necessarily deliver. And that's the opposite of impact. That is a drain on resources and time and money and energy that is the death knell of careers. And so, like I said, I think it starts internally before we start to go external. That's where good partnerships begin.
You made a really interesting point, actually, and it's something that we've talked about in roundtables, and this discussion comes up, every time we have an in-person meeting and a conference. How do you create that kind of impactful relationship within the company first? Who are your stakeholders? How do you go and find them? How do you show value?
Yeah, I think it's a great question that you have to ask of like, who are the stakeholders that matter in our organization and matter to the role of partnerships that I'm in? It begins in really 2 ways that we can explore simultaneously. First, we need to understand at an organizational level, what does the company care about? What value is important to the organization? And that value is a thing that can be defined in more ways than we often recognize, right? We often think about economic value, like what drives revenue to the company. But the CEO of a company is setting priorities that may or may not always reflect purely around revenue and profit. It may be we're looking to enhance our brand reputation, to improve products, be a beloved in the eyes of our customers, to improve retention. Those are other forms of value that ultimately will lead to delivering revenue and profit, but understanding like what are the immediate priorities of the organization based on the CEO's objectives and goals and priorities that have been cascaded down. That's a starting point that we need to understand to determine what opportunities is the company overall going to be prioritizing. At the next level down, it's saying, well, what team do I report into? If you report into a sales organization, you report to a CRO or head of sales as a partnerships function, your goals are going to be filtered through the lenses that those teams are prioritizing, right? You're probably going to be charged with driving revenue, driving leads, and so forth, somewhat obviously. But in other parts of the organization, if you are in charge of driving integrations as part of the product team, your goals are going to be dictated accordingly. And the priorities from top down are going to be filtered through the lens of what matters to product and so forth. So I think at an organizational level, it's critical to understand. At an individual level, where you are within the organization is critical to determine which stakeholders are going to be impactful to your ability to drive results and who you need to be focused on. And ultimately, when we look to identify where are the opportunities that we can play, it's aligning the stars between all of those different sources of opportunity and value and what matters and why people should care internally. That's going to drive the answer to that question.
And you make an interesting point. When you're defining what matters to different people in your organization and you're finding those stakeholders, it changes how you create that partnership program in whatever way you're doing it, affiliate channel. If you're doing an integration partnership, if that's what your company is primarily focusing on, it's different based on the end goal of those stakeholders. Yet I imagine that key principles in creating that in relationships remain very, very much the same.
Yeah, 100%. At the end of the day, everyone has their own answer to the question of why should I care? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the most important question to answer at every stage of the partnerships journey, when it's starting internally and understanding what resources, what stakeholders, what individual people do I need to be aligned with because their teams are necessary to supporting the integration or channel sales or whatever the goals of partnership will be. Understanding why does that CMO care? Why does that marketing director care? Why does that head of product going to give a damn about the opportunities that I can bring to the table via partnership? And that continues on into the partnering journey itself. Why would XYZ company care? What value are they seeking at an organizational level? And then down to why are why would the stakeholders that I'm trying to communicate with, my partner counterparts and the people that they are trying to solicit resources from, why would they care? Mm-hmm. And then that continues to the final stage. Once you actually have signed a partnership, why would they continue to care? What value is this partnership delivering against the goals and KPIs that they are charged with meeting? Keeping that question in mind continuously throughout the process of identifying opportunities, partnering, and then delivering the value from partnerships, the ongoing work of managing and implementing and enabling partnerships. Why should they care is the number one question to be asking at every level.
And it's such a mediation when you're, evaluating that question of why I should care and why they should care, and then moving to why the partner should care. You're almost creating that bridge between your company and the partner. And at a certain point in that relationship, there are times where you have to fight for the partner's perspective because what they care about can differentiate from what the company cares about, but be more impactful in the way that you deliver that information and update your company based on what they need. So in that way, how do you fight for your partner's perspective and what they care about if that ends up being something that the company has not yet delivered?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. One of the very first lessons that I learned in my partnerships career, which dates back 20 years, was a mentor of mine who said that partnerships is a balance between advocating on behalf of your partner and towing the company line. Mm-hmm. And there's a necessary tension, like a rubber band, to keep whatever in place, in this case, a partnership contained and delivering. There's a necessary tension that needs to be between those two. And so having a keen understanding of what is the reason we're in this partnership in the first place from our own company's standpoint, and always remembering that and understanding, what's the answer to our partners' version of that answer? Why are they in this partnership? That's the tension that has to be kept in place at all times in order for the partnership to continue to deliver. Recognizing that on your own is only the first step, right? And then that's what informs the need to keep that balance. And sometimes that'll mean saying no to partners and being a bad guy, and recognizing that, in order for my company and my stakeholders to continue to support this partnership, and not instead move in a direction of, killing this deal, partnering with somebody else, building or buying instead of pursuing partnerships for this particular initiative at all, we need to sometimes, put our foot down and recognize when the value is being limited to us. And the same exact thing needs to be recognized on the other side. In order for us to realize the value of a given partnership, our partners need to be fully aligned on that as well. And that's where the tension comes, and the need to keep that balance is there. The way that I think about partnerships is that partnerships is only one potential path to creating value for an organization. You can build, you can buy, you could do something else. In order for partnerships to be chosen as the right path and to continue to be invested in as the right path, that partnership needs to create more value than every other option. And the second that stops happening is the beginning of the end of a partnership in pursuit of a different path.
And how do we do that? How do we start and create that value where it is the driving value of a company?
Well, again, I think it starts at understanding kind of what is it that we're after as an organization. What value matters? Are we looking to increase, our product value, drive, increase retention, improve our customers, success scoring in a way that our customers will stick around longer? I mean, partnerships have shown time and time again to increase retention, reduce churn, drive, co-selling motions that will improve our, ACV as well as our speed to closing. Understanding what is the objective that we're after is the beginning of that, and then determining who are the partners that can help us deliver against those goals, who are the ones who have an alignment on our go-to-market motion, who have an alignment on where their product and our product are better together, and have an alignment on our timing, and where our ability to actually partner together and deliver against those goals collectively is aligned. That's what's going to be the beginning of whether or not we can actually have a successful partnership that delivers impact.
It's interesting that you say that. And I hate to bring it back to the pandemic, because I know that we're all very done with that. But at the same time, it really showed us how we as a SaaS community can co-market and co-sell together without immediate proximity. And it gave us a big window into how we can continue on those relationships with companies in and of themselves, working within that community mindset. And there's something to be said about the way that we're moving in terms of partnerships, to the point where I do believe it will be something that is immeasurable within a company. You'll need to have a partnerships program, a partnerships professional lead, helping you to gain more business through co-selling with another company that's either comparable to yours or something that will value add to a longer LTV of a sale. And I'm curious, I mean, I don't like to feature too much on these SaaS Connects, because who knows what's going to happen, but how do you see partnerships growing within the SaaS community?
Well, I mean, in the words of Jay McBain, formerly of Forrester and now Canalys, right? We're in the decade of ecosystems. Yeah, that line I think has been bandied about a lot, because it's recognition of a moment that we're in right now that frankly is something that's unlike anything I've seen in the past 20 years in being in partnerships and in varying industries, including SaaS. There's a conversation happening around partnerships now that is, I feel like, getting louder and louder, and not just amongst our fellow partnership leaders, but amongst the CEOs or company leaders, where the recognition that trillion-dollar companies are made by having robust ecosystems. I mean, that's the path of Microsoft and HubSpot and Salesforce. And to not invest fully in partnerships, to not have partnerships have a seat at the table at the highest levels of the organization, is to sacrifice against the goal of building one of the biggest and most successful companies in the world. And so I think where partnerships are going is recognizing that it's the confluence of partnerships being a core strategy in the organization that aligns all varying go-to-market motions, channel, marketing, sales, and so forth, as well as product and all the other components that make a partnership into an ecosystem. That's the direction that I think partnerships is going, and we are all the stewards of that.
You make a really interesting point there, because it does seem, and this tended to happen throughout SaaS, year after year, there was a new way to really propel business. And I think most recently it was product-led growth, which is something that you of course need. But when it comes to partnerships, it's a piece of it. It's not the entire situation. You're working with product, you're working with marketing, you're working with your entire team to really create relationships and build something that's long lasting in a community. And, on the human level, partnerships really speaks to that kind of connection that you want to have a long-term business and to work within an ecosystem. And I think you're right. I think maybe it was just something that we didn't give a name to when HubSpot was doing it, when Salesforce was doing it. And now we know the secret sauce is partnerships, and being left and behind will be a detriment to your company at a certain point.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree.
But as we move forward into that, I mean, just kind of diving into somebody coming into this profession who wants to grow their partnership community within a new SaaS company. We talked a little bit about where to begin with that, but what are some of the more tangible logistical elements of it? How do we create a framework around it to prove that value, to train a team?
Yeah, well, I think it depends on the stage of partnerships in a given organization, right? If you're coming into a HubSpot or Microsoft or a Salesforce or any company that obviously has a pretty well-established partnerships motion, I mean, that's a great place to learn from what is already working, because a lot of the cogs are already humming in the machine. I think the opportunity there, of course, is joining a later stage company, is to see how a particular slice of the machine works. But as you move up in those organizations, or if you move to an earlier stage company where partnerships is a little less mature, and the role that you are taking on is one that has to establish a partnerships motion or oversee one that already exists, taking that step back and thinking about kind of that idea we talked about earlier, what I call the value alignment framework, is I think a really core component. And when I talk about that, what I mean by value alignment framework is understanding that the path to successful partnerships requires aligning the value of every stage and stakeholder along the way, from your internal teams to the partners that you're going to seek, and to maintaining that alignment of what's in it for me, why should I care, continuously through the life of the partnership. At an earlier stage company, that means establishing, well, what is it that partnership is meant to drive, and delivering that value by way of partnerships once. Before you can build a really viable, successful, scalable partnership program, you need to start with a partner. And moving too quickly to start to scale and say, how can we get tens, dozens, hundreds of partners into a well-established partnership program, is jumping into a quality versus quantity debate that is generally never won by quantity. Understanding what is it that the company needs, what our partners need to deliver, how do we actually deliver that, how do we enable partners, getting that right with the first handful of partners to demonstrate the value internally, that partnerships can be a significant percentage of revenue, can be a driver of retention and customer satisfaction and so forth. That is where you cut your teeth within an organization. And that requires, again, that alignment at every level to then be able to say, well, now let's do this over and over again. And we'll have the support to build the systems, hire the people to go deeper into all those varying spheres of the role that, if you join HubSpot, you might be in that small role, but when you are leading it from the charge, you're building to that point.
No, that's a really good point. Just to answer a question that's in the Q&A, I do definitely recommend that if you have any questions throughout the SaaS Connect 101, please drop them in there. We're here to answer those questions and get you guys up and running. Whether you're in the stage of beginning partnerships, whether you're in a company where you're really looking to revamp and grow, put those questions in there. Very happy to answer them. But Scott, we touched a little bit on this about the key principles of partnerships. And we kind of touched on that value alignment about getting that internal stakeholder within your company. Is there anything that we're missing in terms of those key principles to really help a partnership, one, create, two, grow?
I mean, for me, it comes down to first principles always. And, not to kind of beat a dead horse, but I think it's understanding kind of where in your organization partnerships is meant to play a role. And that often comes down to kind of organizationally, where is partnerships, aligned? just earlier today had a conversation with someone named Francois Grenier, and he was the head of partnerships at a bunch of SaaS companies, Typeform, currently at Leica, as Sendoso previously. And our conversation went to kind of where you are in the organization impacts the role that you play in partnerships. And I think that's something that when it comes to selecting your partnership roles and understanding kind of what opportunity there is for partnerships within a company, that's a critical factor. He was describing how, at one company, he was reporting directly into the founders. And in those instances, there's a centralized function of partnerships that can oversee and pull in stakeholders from all the varying teams to really create a kind of an ecosystem model of saying, well, this partnership is going to drive channel opportunities, it's going to drive influence, and it's going to drive retention, it's going to drive product integration. And that's going to require resources for marketing and product and sales and other teams. Other instances, and he described when you were working directly in the CMO organization, for example, the goals that are going to be ascribed to you are going to be much more aligned with the goals of marketing. It's going to drive, how many leads have you driven this month? How many opportunities are we creating? Same thing if you report into sales or otherwise. So I think the first thing we need to understand is just, again, who is it that we are trying to appeal to? I'd say an ultimate goal is for us to always be centrally located, reporting up into the CEO as close as we can so that we have oversight across an opportunity to create partnerships that impact and drive the direction of the entire company. But until any individual, until partnerships as a whole is kind of constantly reporting up to a chief partnerships officer, I think the necessary step is to understand kind of where in the organization are you so that you can have the maximum impact to those goals, which just continues to give partnerships a seat at the table.
And I think something you said earlier really resonates with that as well. Taking a handful of partners and really making sure with that small group that you're creating success initially so that you can prove the model and repeat it to grow into that larger partnership teams and eventually have that hierarchy of a VP of partnerships, a head of partnerships, and a full team working to continue on with this model. And there are a ton, we've all done it. We've all begun partnership programs. We've all tried to build them with different ideas in mind. And we've all failed to a certain extent at something that we've done. But what are common mistakes that you typically see when somebody is creating that partnerships model in a company?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think there's a few things that I would mention here, and I think a big one is all the things that we've talked about already a number of times of the internal work, and then I'd say the next step though is where one of the first pitfalls begins, understanding who are the companies that are aligned with the value that we're looking to create for ourselves, and vice versa. We have a strong hypothesis on what value we can create for them. A lot of time can be spent on working on partnerships that ultimately go nowhere. That can be solved by having a clear prioritization of our pipeline. Understanding the idea of an ideal partner profile is probably a pretty common concept, but thinking about that early enough to be able to say, before I start going and engaging conversations and spending time going down rabbit holes, what is it that what value are we looking to create from this partnership? And does the company that we are looking at have access to that opportunity? If we're looking to drive sales within a new market, and do they have a go-to-market motion that aligns with the way that our product is sold? Do they have a size of a customer base that aligns with ours? Do they have, and then as we get into conversations after defining some of those foundational components, do they have the culture that will support our ability to be successful in a partnership with them? Are they able to move at our speed, or vice versa? So defining what does our ideal partnership look like so that we can go find companies that match that profile allows us to get to the next phase more successfully of actually launching and delivering value against those partnerships. And that's where some of those blockers come up, is not having a clear alignment of the KPIs that a partnership is intending to deliver to the stakeholders on both sides of the organization. So I talked a lot already about how understanding what's important to our organizations internally, as well as on our partner side, is important to getting a partnership off the ground. Maintaining a partnership requires continuing access to resources on the product and marketing and all sorts of engineering, other teams that are necessary to keep a partnership alive. And again, people want to know, why should I care? And the answer to that is because it hits these KPIs, because these KPIs that matter to you, head of sales, head of product, head of marketing, so forth, that's what this partnership is delivering against. And oftentimes there's a lost in translation that can happen that can stall partnerships and prevent them from being supported, whether that is to grow and scale into a broader partnership program or to maintain an existing partnership because it just doesn't deliver against the results that people are desiring for their own goals. And so being keenly aware of that is great.
Inherently in a partnership, and I mean, this is something that kind of goes without saying, but we need that value on both sides. We both need to understand why we care and deliver on that for the company and for the partner in and of themselves. And so being very upfront about that and we've talked about the agreements and the referral agreements in several SaaS Connects and roundtables as well, but really outlining what that relationship and that partnership means to both sides to deliver on those KPIs is key. And I'm curious from your end, because I've seen a fair amount of referral agreements just at the various companies that I've worked. I've written some, I've developed more, but what from your experience is the best way to go about creating that referral agreement and that framework for it?
Yeah. And, taking it back to that question of why should they care? It goes to what is it that referral is going to drive for any given company? And depending on the format of that relationship, if it's a kind of solution provider organization, it's the revenue from a revenue share is probably going to be relatively insignificant compared to the revenue from adding additional services onto a particular partnership, right? Any sort of agency partnerships and so forth, the referral is really going to be successful only insofar as it helps them drive their core business and not the 30% of a $50 a month product that's going to be, the kind of perhaps the core of the referral agreement. And I think that's a core thing to understand is how does it or does it not align the value of that referral agreement to the things that actually help that company get out of bed in the morning, that are going to keep their stakeholders excited. Because again, it comes back to the KPIs. So revenue share, which is probably the most thought about thing in referral agreements, I think is just really a starting point for a broader conversation of what is this agreement going to allow us to do together and how are we going to drive those KPIs that matter most to the stakeholders on both sides.
Interesting that you say that, because I do hear about that situation from a lot of different referral partners that I've worked with. The revenue share is great. It's something that they appreciate, but it's not necessarily the end goal, even from the beginning for them. They want that larger partnership, that ability to continuously partner with you in marketing and throughout the rest of their sales cycle. And I think it leads to something that we've chatted about before, but the co-selling model that is moving to the forefront of partnerships. It seems to be the new wave of how partnerships are moving forward as a department, as a phenomenon in and of itself. And I'm kind of curious about where do you begin with that relationship?
Yeah, having that better together story begins with really understanding the customer needs at the end of the day. If customers are telling you that these are the deficiencies in our product, that is going to inform obviously which direction should we be going with partnerships. Once you have partnerships in place that solve the needs of your customers, that's going to provide opportunities to collect the case studies and stories that will be empowering in every other channel. Your marketing team, your sales team, they need to understand how this product is actually serving end customers, because that is going to help them do their job better. Sales teams want to know first off, they want to know if anything can help them sell, but also more importantly, is something going to get in the way of them selling. And if you can demonstrate very clearly to your sales team, your partner sales team, whoever's kind of leading the charge, that this better together story, evidenced by the actual real world results that our end customers are having, is going to actually help them enhance their close, speed up their close, help them retire quota faster. That's going to be the thing that matters most, because again, it answers the question of why should they care? Because it helps them do their job, helps them hit their KPIs, helps them finish their quotas faster. And that's the number one thing that I think is the kind of starting point is, as you develop your partnership, you want to ultimately understand what value is that delivering to the end customer, because that delivers value at every other level back in the organization.
And something that you hit on there, and I've actually had a few conversations even in the last week about this, but the transparency aspect of it, the ability now with partnerships and to really create that co-selling model and make it successful relies on being transparent as a company about who you're selling to and what the process is and what's coming in terms of product, and really being able to share that with partners and not have this wall up where it's just, you sell this, I give you a referral fee, and that's the end of our partnership now. to move forward, you really have to open the doors and you have to let people in and to let them see what's going on so that they can sell with you. And that better together model that you talked about, really do that as a team that's informed on either side.
100%. Weaving together the stakeholders on all sides, whether that's sales teams or engineering or product or whomever, that relationship that exists not only between partner managers, but at every level of the organization is a path to creating the ecosystem that helps build ecosystems. Mm-hmm. As my friend Jared Fuller is often likes to say, trust is the new data. Data was the new oil. Trust between every part of the organization creates transparency, creates awareness of opportunity, and is what helps the value flow across all sides. And so, relationships that can be weaved between stakeholders across the organization at every level is what's going to help facilitate a deepening engagement, a recognition of the value that's being created, and keep the balance that is so necessary in order to drive successful, impactful partnerships.
That's it's such a good point. And it's something I loved hearing that from Jared. He was at SaaS Connect this year, and he did kind of an impromptu talk about that at one of the happy hours that we had with them. And it's so true. To give that transparency and to have trust be the thing that really pushes a company forward is such a new concept, even now, even moving into the way that we've come out of, this 2-year lockdown and not being able to really connect with each other on an interpersonal level. We want trust, and we want to move partnerships forward with that trust in mind. And if you guys haven't checked out partnerhacker.com, I definitely recommend it. It's a great media outlet. Tons of information on partnerships as well. But, moving forward with that and combining that with education, something we didn't really touch on necessarily, but we did talk a little bit about it, is why hasn't there been education for partnership professionals? Why are we only seeing it now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've often likened kind of partnerships today to where entrepreneurship was, call it 20 years ago, from an educational standpoint. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, 20, 30 years ago, the idea of being an entrepreneur wasn't quite as sexy as it is today. It was something that you didn't study in school. And over time, business schools started to recognize that entrepreneurship is an amalgamation of the same skills that are required for, being a manager of a company. It's a combination of finance and strategy and marketing and so forth. The same skills that are taught to an MBA to be a manager are the same skills, just applied to starting a company, but applied in a different way. But the same fundamental amalgamation of skills that are needed to be successful as an entrepreneur. Well, partnerships, and by the way, one that started to be realized to be taught in schools, the lift of entrepreneurship as something that didn't make your parents cry because that was the chosen profession, but instead became something that people left traditional jobs in banking or elsewhere to go and be a startup founder. I think that's where the recognition started to be felt. Similarly, I think partnerships is at that place now, where it is also an amalgamation of the same skills that are necessary to manage an existing company or run an existing company, but applied to scaling and growing a company. It's a combination of finance and marketing and sales and other skill sets that are taught in schools. But only now we're starting to recognize what is the language we need to use to describe how it can be best applied. And as the conversation about partnerships is being had amongst the ecosystem of ecosystem people, that is how the textbooks will be written. That is how the professors will be, tenured. That is how the educational opportunities start to advance. So I think it began with a lot of the informal conversation that begins in communities like this. And only now are we starting to formalize it in the way that, companies like Firneo are starting to build more traditional tracks, structuring the learning that has come from people who've been in the job, but the knowledge may be stuck in their minds and applied at their companies. But by creating opportunities to share it, and what we're doing is creating opportunities to formalize it into educational tracks, that becomes a pathway where partnerships becomes, just like being an entrepreneur became legitimized, it becomes an opportunity for chief partnerships and ecosystem officers to be a recognized function when that path to get to that role and to see the legitimacy and the impact is clear.
It's so interesting. And it's so true because every partnership leader and professional I know has come from such a different background with so much different experience, marketing, finance. I was a journalism major. I was a journalist for maybe 30 days of my entire life. And I didn't realize that these were the skills that were also easily able to translate into partnerships. And there's really something to be said about giving people the opportunity to move into a role like this by letting them know that, hey, these skills are something that would make you an amazing partnership professional, that would help you grow this kind of department within a company. And like you said, going into a role that makes your parents want to cry, journalism. Even, when I went to university, this wasn't something that you could do. There was no partnerships position that I would come out and know that I could dive into and learn from. But now we're able to continue. And I hope we don't lose that. I hope we don't formalize it to the point where those with different backgrounds in education and maybe, even no post-secondary, but they have crazy interpersonal skills that would translate really well into this. I hope we don't lose that side of it where it's accessible.
I would agree 100%. And I think, the good news is I think there are well-established fields that that have become formalized in a way that still have those tracks remaining. Think of being a software engineer, right? Mm-hmm. Often, something that you can certainly study in school, computer science and so forth, but in the past decade or so, boot camps and so forth have come out so that anyone who wants to make that change, number one, they recognize that that is a profession that might match to their interests and abilities. And there's a clear path to be able to do that, even if you weren't on that track to begin with. I think the same opportunity exists in partnerships. Right now, it is very much a field that people fall into. The number of people that I've talked to over the years that have found themselves in partnerships because their mm-hmm. role evolved from sales, or they maybe were a former lawyer negotiating deals and they thought they'd be interested to be on the commercial side or so forth, is innumerable. And I think there's a draw of partnerships that is maybe a little bit hard to put your finger on right now, because it has a lot of those softer skills and so forth that seem like that sounds like fun. And mm-hmm. it draws people to the profession. And I think that will never go away, but it'll just be even easier to find yourself switching gears from being a journalism major or investment banker or a software engineer to say, these are the skills that I know I need because I see the path to the end of my career. And that was also a challenge that I think has existed in the realm of partnerships for a while and still does. And I think hopefully over the next decade, perhaps we solve for this. I often think, is there a clear path to retiring in this job?
Interesting.
Right now, if you're an accountant, if you're a lawyer, right, you can be a partner, you can be a CFO. You see what the end of your career could look like. That's not really the case with partnerships. In much of my career, I've personally fretted about, well, where do I go from here? And I have friends that said, well, I've reached a VP level and I've done that at a few different companies. Well, now what? And they might move into product or marketing or somewhere where there's a C-suite role for them, or become a CEO, which is a natural path that of course is a great one, but not necessarily the one for everyone. But being able to say, I see that when I'm in my 60s or 70s and I'm ready to retire, I could have a path that stayed on the partnerships track forever because I'm a chief partnerships officer, because I'm a chief ecosystem officer, a chief business development officer. And that is a path I want to be on without having to switch to a different role with different skill sets. Once we start to see that happen, I think the role becomes even more attractive and the path becomes even more clear.
Scott, just, while we have a few minutes left, any kind of, final thoughts, any roundups for really creating that path to an impactful partnership?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just, repeat that kind of core idea that I think is so foundational, but fundamental and frankly, sometimes overlooked, which is, understanding the value that is being delivered to every level of organization and individual at every stage along the process, and having alignment of that value is the path to a successful partnership. And it's the path to a successful partnership career. Because the more we all can understand how impact is delivered to a company, what is impactful, what is important, what is valuable, the more we can understand how do we actually tangibly, tactically deliver that value by way of partnerships, which is a more scalable channel than almost any other channel inside of a partnership, given the opportunity to leverage the resources of an ecosystem and partners. The more we understand and can demonstrate our ability for partnerships to deliver the value that actually matters, the more impact we'll have at a company, the more impact partnerships people will have as a profession, the more opportunity will come to people to deliver impact across the industry, and the more of a path will be paved to that chief partnerships officer, so that we can all, all of us who are here right now doing this are on that path to creating a career for others to come behind us.
That's amazing. Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's the continued conversation that's going to move everybody forward. But I don't see any questions in the chat, which means you and I have done an amazing SaaS Connect one-on-one, and we've answered every question that anybody could possibly have.
Well, if anyone has any further questions, feel free to reach out. I'm on the CSA Slack, and I can ping me on LinkedIn. Would love to chat and happy to help however I can.
Oh, we've got one here. Okay, Kira. So new to the whole partnership scene. They work at a partner success company, and they asked me to join in to listen. I think we're doing great things in the area as we aim to educate individuals in leadership and partnership skills, but they're still young, but excited about joining the partnership community. And that's great. It's amazing to start a partnerships department within a company. So Kira, you're not in our Slack channel right now. Okay, definitely. I can give you a little bit of CSA background. We have an amazing Slack channel of over 4,000 people. Scott's in there. He's very active within the channel. We connect partnership professionals to each other. We really create a space for you guys to network, to learn from each other, to grow, and to answer that question that we've all been trying to answer. Even Scott and I throughout this discussion, and maybe we hit it, but maybe, we all have a little bit more to add to it. What does partnerships mean? How do we define it? And how do we grow it? And how do we create that path? So www.cloudsoftwareassociation.com, and I'll drop it in the chat. Go on there. It's free to join CSA, jump in on the conversations, and definitely join more of our SaaS Connect one-on-ones. We have one almost every single week, and we also get together in person. Quite a bit actually now. But awesome. Thank you all so much. Hopefully we'll see you at the next one. And Scott, thank you. Yeah, definitely check out Scott in Slack, and I'm in there as well all day long.
All right, everybody. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Bye now.